Hi guys, today I'm going to take you step by step on how you can make the Ariel corset at home. This corset is fully boned and lined. It also includes a waist shaping tape. It has a dropped waist and then it is a semi-sweetheart at the neckline. The pattern is available for download at the link in my bio. We'll take it step by step. I try to break this down as much as I can. I consider this a fairly beginner-friendly corset, and I wouldn't say corsets are normally pretty beginner-friendly, but this one is really straightforward. This will come in sizes extra small through 3XL. Now I'm wearing an extra small and normally I only wear a small, so you can see it's pulled really tight. So if you want your corset pulled really tight, you can always size down. Make sure you check out the materials list. You are going to need a main fabric, a lining fabric, your grommets. I'm using a 1/4 inch and I'm using 18. You can always use a different size if you choose. You're going to need a lace-up string for the back. You'll want some 1/4 inch boning, light to mid-weight interfacing. That's going to be your strength layer and help give your top some structure, some bias tape and matching fabric, or you can use a bias tape maker. And then finally, you're going to want to use ribbon, and that is for that waist shaping tape. The cutting instructions are on your actual pattern pieces, so go ahead and cut your pattern pieces and meet me back here and let's start the tutorial. The first thing we're going to want to do is just iron on our interfacing. That's going to give our corset some structure and strength. So I'm going to do that to all of the back of my main fabric pieces. And once I've done that, I'm just going to align all my pieces. So I've got my center front, my side back, and then my center back. And I'm going to align those in the order that you see here. So I like to sew one side at a time. This helps because sometimes you get a little bit off, even if it's just like 1/2 centimeter. If you continue to get off more and more, you're gonna at the end have a crooked corset. So I like to go side by side, choose what side you want to start on, and we'll start going back to center and then do the opposite side and go back to center. So I'm starting with one side of my center back and my side back pieces. I'm going to place those right sides facing, and I'm going to align at that side seam. I'm going to pin those into place, and then once I have them pinned into place, I'm going to sew them down. There is a 0.5 inch seam allowance in the entire pattern, so you don't need to add it on. So once I sew this down, I'm going to sew it down with a 0.5 inch seam allowance. Once that's been sewn, you can see I have my side back and my center back connected right here. I'm going to take my side front and I'm going to place that right sides facing onto my side back, and I'm going to pin those all along that seam. Again, right sides facing, and then once I have that pinned, again, I'm going to sew down using a 0.5 inch seam allowance. Once that's sewn, you can see I have my center back, my side back, and my side front all sewn together. Now I'm going to take my center front and I'm going to place that right sides facing onto my side front. I'm going to pin all the way along that side. Be mindful of your curves and make sure you use extra pins if you need to. And then once I have that all pinned, I'm going to sew that down into place just like we've done all of our other panels. After this has been sewn, you can see we have one whole side complete. So this is what I mean when I say I do one side and then the opposite side so that I make sure I'm not getting off at all. Now we're just going to repeat all of those steps for the other side exactly how we did the opposite side, and then we will connect at the center until you have a full corset. Once you've repeated all of those first couple steps, we are going to press our seam allowance away from the center front and towards the center back. So when you get to the opposite side, you'll be sewing it the opposite way, still going towards the center back and away from the center front. For those curves, I like to use a little tailoring hand so you make sure those are nice and flat. And you can see here, I'm going the opposite way, but still towards the center back. And we're pressing those down because we're actually going to sew those down and create our channels for our boning. So here I am sewing down all of that seam allowance, and we're going to do that for each of our seams. So make sure you get a good press, and again, make sure they're all going the correct direction. Once that's sewn down, it should look like this. Here is my channel, my seam allowance sewn down, and then right there is where our boning is going to go through. After all of your channels have been sewn down, we're actually just going to repeat all of those steps for our lining. So everything the exact same, doing all of our panels, pressing our seam allowance away from the center front towards the center back and then sewing down those seams to create channels. That's all that we're gonna do for our lining, the exact same as we did our main fabric. Now you can set your lining aside. We won't be adding it just yet because we're gonna do our waist tape right now. You are gonna wanna use ribbon or something really sturdy because you don't want any stretch in your waist tape. So you can see I have those marks right there. That is the marks that are indicated on your pattern for your waist seam. And we wanna get our ribbon right in the center of that. So I'm gonna start measuring out how much ribbon I need for my waist. I like to add a little bit of extra just in case while I'm sewing I realize I didn't cut enough. And then once I'm done, I'll chop off the extra, but I'm gonna cut my ribbon to the exact amount that I need, plus a little bit extra for just in case. Now I'm just gonna start placing my waist tape onto this. I'm gonna pin it into place, making sure I don't have my pins too close to the seams because we're gonna sew this on the opposite side and stitch in the ditch because I don't wanna see any of the sewing. So we're gonna sew it on the right side of our fabric. So make sure your pins aren't too close to those seams because you don't wanna hit a pin while you're sewing. But when I say stitch in the ditch, I mean we're gonna sew right on top of our other sewing so that we don't see any of those sew lines. So I'll show you what I mean. Here I am sewing down just the ribbon portion, and then I'm gonna pull this away from my sewing machine, and you'll see once I snip those threads, you shouldn't actually be able to see the sewing on the right side of the fabric. It should be pretty invisible. And once I've done that for one seam, we're gonna go ahead and do that for all of our seams for our ribbon so that it is completely attached to our main fabric corset. And now I'm gonna grab my boning and we're gonna start inputting our boning into all of our channels. So the first thing you wanna do is measure out your boning along each seam. So we're doing this in each seam and we're gonna make sure we have 3/4 of an inch from the bottom and 3/4 of an inch from the top. And I'm gonna go ahead and cut 2 of those so that I have them for both of those side back, center back seams. And again, we'll do this for each of our channels and all of our seam allowance that's been sewn down. Once I have all of my boning pieces cut, I'm going to tape off the ends. There's a couple ways that you can do this. If you are using steel boning, they normally have caps. You can also burn the edges of your plastic boning, but essentially what this is going to do is help your boning not come out from your corset when you're sitting. If you've ever had that happen, or sometimes it happens with underwire, and when you're sitting and moving, it starts to come out from the seams. Taping them or burning them or capping your steel boning will help prevent that from happening as you wear your corset. And once I got my boning pieces taped at the ends, I am just going to start inserting them into all of their channels, and I'll do this for all of my seam allowance channels. Now we will have one more boning channel to do, but that won't be till closer to the end, so don't put your boning away just yet, but we are gonna grab our lining. We're gonna take our lining and we're gonna place that right sides facing onto our corset, and we are going to pin all along the top edge as well as both of the sides. Now I like to start my pinning by aligning all of the seams. You want the seams of your main fabric and your lining fabric to align, so that way when we put these right sides out, everything is in line. But so I pin just the seams first, and then I'll go back in and kind of fill in a bunch of those empty spaces. And once I have my top edge all pinned into place and all of my seams aligned, I'm going to pin down both of the sides. So make sure you do both of the sides. Don't mess with the bottom just yet. We'll do that a little bit later. Leave your bottom open, and we're gonna go ahead and pin down both sides. And once I've pinned down both sides and the top edge, we're gonna sew this into place. And when I sew this, I like to do it all in one go. So I've sewn one side right here. I like to put my needle down, my presser foot up, rotate my corset, and then I'll put my presser foot back down, and then also all the way along the top edge, and then repeat that rotating process and do the other side. This way you're sewing it all in one go, and it also helps keep your corners really sharp. Once you've sewn your lining onto the top edge and sides, we are just going to clip at the curves. This is going to help this sit really flat, especially at that little sweetheart center right there. Make sure you get a good clip right there. Don't clip your actual sewing, but get right up to it. And this is really going to help this sit flat when we put it right sides out. After I've done my little clips, I'm also going to clip both of those corners because that's also going to help the corners look nice and sharp. And then we're just going to flip this right sides out and give it a nice press. You can do an optional top stitch if you want to along the top or along the sides. Because I have a pattern, I wanted to skip the top stitching, but if you want to do a top stitch, feel free to add that to your corset. Now we're gonna make our last boning channel. So this is marked on your actual pattern piece. There is a gray line. It is 0.5 inches from where your center back is. So I am just marking this with a ruler. Again, it's 0.5 inches from where the center back is. And we'll repeat this for both of your back panels. And once I have marked this, I am just going to sew straight down that line. Now this straight line is going to create our last channel that we're going to put our boning into. This is why we didn't put our boning away before. So we have 2 more pieces that we're going to cut. I'm going to place this up against the channel that we've just created. And because we've already done our seam allowance at the top, we're only going to cut 3/4 of an inch away from the bottom. So you don't actually have to measure 3/4 of an inch away from the top, just the bottom. Cut 2 of those. Again, I'm going to tape my edges so I don't have to worry about them poking through. And then once I've done that, I'm going to insert this into our newly sewn channels. This boning piece is here because it's actually what our grommets are going to go up against. So when you're pulling a corset and you're pulling it really tight and it's being laced up, you don't want those grommets to just pull on fabric because it doesn't make it sturdy. It could eventually start tearing or ripping. And so you want them to go up to something a little bit stronger. And so that's why we put a back boning piece and channel into our 2 back panels so that those grommets and the lace has something to really pull against that's not just fabric. Now we're going to start finishing up the bottom of the corset. We are going to do a bias tape finish, but I'm going to start off by just doing a base stitch from our main fabric to our lining fabric. So I'm pinning this in place. Make sure when you pin into place, you're aligning all of the seams. So the seams from your lining and the seam from your main fabric are all in the same place. And I'm going to pin this all the way along, and then I'm just going to perform a base stitch and combine those 2 fabric pieces at the bottom of our corset. Since this is just a base stitch, I went ahead and sewed that off camera, but now I've got my bias tape ready. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our bias tape and we are going to take this to the bottom of our corset with right sides facing. Align the bottom of your bias tape. For the edges, you want to take about 0.5 inches and flip it over so it looks like this. And then we're just going to start pinning this in place. I use a lot of pins when I do my bias tape because it's kind of the last step. You want it to look nice and neat. I feel like finishings are always one of those things where you can tell is something homemade or is it not. And so I try to take a lot of time with my bias tape, use a lot of pins. And again, we're doing this right sides facing to the bottom of the corset, aligning the edge of our bias tape. And when I get to the end of my corset, that's center back, I have a little extra here, so I'm gonna clip it off and I'm gonna leave about 0.5 inches and I'm gonna wrap that around the edge so that when we go to flip over our corset, it will look all nice and finished. But once that's all pinned, we are just going to sew this down into place. Now that part of our bias tape has been sewn, I'm just going to put little snips into the bias tape. You can also trim off the seam allowance. This will just help it sit really flat, especially at those curves. Once I've done that, I'm going to flip our bias tape over. And there's a couple ways that you can do this, so I'm going to show you guys both ways. But you can flip this over and you can fold in one side of your bias tape and then flip it so that basically there's a little bit of bias tape on the front side of your corset and the lining, just like this. Because I'm using a print, I don't want to see any of the bias tape on the front of my corset, so I'm actually flipping in the raw edges and then flipping it all the way over so it looks like this. And you guys can choose to do that either way that you like. I just don't want to see any of my bias tape because it's messing up the print that I've done for my corset. So I'm flipping this all the way over, and pinning it into place. And again, make sure you flip over those raw edges so that all of the raw edges should be covered with your bias tape, including the raw edge from the actual bias tape. Hopefully I didn't say bias tape that many times and that makes sense to you guys, but we're again gonna do this nice and slowly. I use lots of pins. You'll see me flip over the corset a couple times and I start to iron as I'm pinning. Again, this is because it's a finishing and I want it to look nice and neat. I feel like it's really easy when you get here to start kind of getting lazy and just speed through things, but having a nice finishing always helps your garment look really nice. So I take my time, I use a lot of pins, I press, and then once I feel like I finally have it looking how I want, then I go over to my sewing machine and I sew my bias tape down into place. Make sure once you've sewn this, give your bias tape one last press. I did forget to film this, but make sure you give it a nice press so it looks nice and neat. And now I'm just going to mark where my grommets are. So I'm using a 1/4 inch grommet and I am doing these starting at 0.5 inches from the bottom and the top, and they are spaced 1 inch apart. So there are 9 total grommets. You do not have to use the same spacing that I use or the same size grommets that I use, but you are welcome to. So here I'm just taking my chalk and I'm measuring out those measurements again. They start at 0.5 inches from the top and 0.5 inches from the bottom, and they are 1 inch apart for 9 total grommets. Make sure you put these right against your boning channel, again, because we want those grommets and that lace to be pulling against the boning channel so that it's not just on fabric and ripping. Now you can use a grommet press or a grommet kit. You don't have to have a professional press like I do. And we are just going to place our grommets into place. And then we're just going to lace up our corset. And that is actually our very last step. Please let me know if you guys have any questions. I hope you love and enjoy your new corset. Follow along for new releases. This pattern is part of a set. It does come with a Valentine's Day set, which is a beautiful off-the-shoulder tiered dress that I absolutely love. You guys are welcome to watch that tutorial as well or purchase that pattern, as these two do fit together, or just wear this individually, however you like. Thank you guys, and again, let me know if you have any questions and follow along for more patterns.